Were there any animals that weren't allowed on Noah's Ark? Today I'll tell you all about the creatures and demons that the Bible and other religious texts warned us about. The giant of the flood. According to a tale from the Talmud, a Jewish text, unicorns presented a unique challenge for Noah during the Great Flood. But what exactly was the challenge? Was its horn too pointy? Was Noah scared he'd poke an eye out? Let's find out. Before the flood, Noah inspected the animals. He announced that all the animals that could lie down would be saved and could enter the ark, but all those who could only stand were forbidden from entering. Unicorns are basically horses, and we know that horses can lie down, so unicorns could too, right? Well, unicorns were a big issue for Noah, literally. The horned creatures were supposedly ginormous, bigger than the ark itself, and yet they were extremely elusive. Noah didn't know how he was going to find one, let alone capture one and save it from the flood, but that's where Og came in. Og was a giant man who offered to help Noah with his unicorn problem for a small price. He also wanted to be saved from the deluge. Noah initially refused, calling Og a demon, but Og pleaded with him, explaining that he feared starvation more than drowning. In the end, Noah reluctantly accepted Og's help. He found and captured a unicorn, as big as a mountain according to the Talmud, and apparently that was the smallest one Og could find. When brought before Noah, the majestic beast laid down, signaling that it needed to be saved. But it couldn't fit in the ark, so Noah came up with a plan. He tied a rope to the unicorn's horn and then attached the other end to the ark. That way it could swim alongside the ark and be fed. But what about Og? Did Noah really help him? Well, as the rain poured down, Og jumped onto the unicorn's back. This forced Noah to make a deal with him. Noah agreed to feed Og just as long as Og promised to serve Noah's descendants. Og, who was giant in stature and therefore had a giant appetite, was extremely eager to eat, so he accepted Noah's proposal. Inside the ark, things were bright and cheerful, thanks to precious stones Noah used for windows. Some animals, like the lions, were troublesome. The phoenix bird, however, was a model passenger, earning eternal life for its good behavior. By the time the rain stopped and the ark landed on Mount Ararat, the unicorn had been saved, even though there was no place for it on the ark. Og wanted to leave, but Noah reminded the giant of his promise, and as the story goes, Og helped with the hard labor of rebuilding after the flood. He built houses and planted seeds around the world. And that's the story about Og and the unicorn, the only animal who couldn't fit on Noah's Ark. The Four Horsemen. The book of Revelation, the final book of the New Testament, is filled with vivid imagery and symbolism about the end times. One of its most famous passages describes the four horsemen of the apocalypse, often interpreted as symbols of conquest, war, famine, and death. The four horsemen are introduced in Revelation chapter 6 verse 1-8, each riding a different colored horse and symbolizing a specific catastrophe. The first, a white horse, represents conquest. The rider, wearing a crown and holding a bow, is often debated. Some believe this rider symbolizes Jesus, but many argue it's the Antichrist, mimicking Jesus and bent on conquering the world. The bow might indicate violence, and after 3.5 years of peace, the Antichrist will wage war on the saints. Following conquest is war, represented by the red horse. The rider carries a large sword and is given the power to remove peace from the earth, leading people to kill one another. This horseman embodies the chaos and violence that often follow conquest, as the Antichrist escalates both physical and spiritual warfare. The black horse symbolizes famine. Its rider carries scales, indicating a time when basic food supplies like wheat and barley become scarce, while luxuries like oil and wine are spared. This famine might be linked to the Antichrist controlling trade and the economy. This is noted in Revelation chapter 13 verse 17, which states that people can't buy or sell without the mark of the beast. Finally, the pale horse, named Death, follows famine. Death, followed by Hades, has power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, plague, and wild beasts. This grim figure represents the ultimate consequence of the preceding horseman's actions: widespread death and destruction. Now the question is, have these events already happened, or are they yet to come? Some historians argue that similar events have occurred throughout history. These events include the Crusades, the 100 Years' War, the bubonic plague, and the Great Famine. However, many believe these specific apocalyptic events are still in our future. The Four Horsemen have also inspired countless works of art, literature, and film, from John Milton's Paradise Lost to the 1975 horror movie The Wicker Man. While it's debated whether the Four Horsemen represent past events or future prophecies, their symbolic power remains strong. For Christians, these visions also come with the hope that Jesus will ultimately restore peace and justice to the world. Dantalion, the Duke of the Deep. Dantalion, a major figure in demonology, is known as a duke who commands 36 legions of spirits. But what is it that makes Dantalion so fascinating? His mastery over human thoughts and emotions. Imagine having the power to understand and alter how people feel and think. Dantalion does exactly that. Dantalion appears in the Ars Goetia, the first book of the Lesser Key of Solomon, a famous 17th century grimoire of demonology. This book gives us a glimpse into his high rank and complex psychological powers. But what does Dantalion look like? He's often depicted as a man with many faces on his head, each showing a different expression, or sometimes as a man holding a book. The many faces symbolize his ability to understand and manipulate a wide range of human emotions and personalities. The book represents the vast knowledge he possesses about human thoughts and the inner workings of the mind. Someone who dabbles in black magic may be able to summon Dantalion. The demon can read and influence thoughts and emotions, making him a powerful ally when you need to persuade someone. He is said to know the thoughts of all people, seeing their innermost feelings and understanding their past and present experiences. He can even show whoever summons him visions of any person, which can help in understanding or manipulating that individual. Life would be a whole lot easier if you were able to change someone's opinion with a mere thought, wouldn't it? That's the kind of power that Dantalion wields. Dantalion certainly isn't a household name, and for good reason, but his influence is present in niche literature and art, exploring themes like psychological manipulation, the complexity of human emotions, and the ethics of mind control. He often symbolizes free will, ethics, and the psychological makeup of individuals. But are people really summoning this demon today? You might want to grab your holy water because yes, they are. In contemporary occult practices, he's often called upon by those seeking a deeper understanding of human psychology or needing help influencing social or personal situations. However, summoning Dantalion isn't something done lightly. Practitioners approach rituals involving him with caution and ethical consideration because of his potent ability to alter thoughts and emotions. These rituals usually aim to gain insights into relationships, influence outcomes requiring deep emotional involvement, or understand complex social dynamics. My question is, once he's been summoned, how do you make him go away? The Beasts of Revelation. In Revelation chapter 13, we encounter two beasts with mind-bending roles. They represent the Antichrist and the false prophet, both empowered by Satan to deceive many during the Great Tribulation. The setup for these beasts begins in the previous chapter with a dramatic scene where a giant dragon, identified as Satan, is hurled down to earth. Satan, often called the devil, is depicted as leading the whole world astray. In this chapter, there's also a woman who some believe represents Israel or the church. Satan tries to attack her but fails, so he turns his fury towards her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. Unable to destroy them, Satan summons two beasts to assist in his evil mission. Who are these beasts? The first beast rises from the sea and is described as having 10 horns, 7 heads, and 10 crowns, with each head bearing a blasphemous name. This beast resembles a leopard, with feet like a bear and a mouth like a lion. Given power and authority by Satan, this beast seems invincible, especially when one of its heads survives what appears to be a fatal wound. This beast is often identified as the Antichrist, a Gentile ruler who will lead a 10-nation confederacy with great authority. The second beast emerges from the earth and has 2 horns and speaks like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast and compels the world to worship the Antichrist. This beast, who's often referred to as the false prophet, will perform great signs, even making fire come down from heaven in full view of people. Many believe this beast comes out of Israel and acts as a powerful religious leader. So how do these 3, Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet, work together. They form an unholy trinity. Satan is always trying to mimic God, so he seeks worship and constructs this deceptive alliance. The Antichrist's supposed death and resurrection imitate Jesus' resurrection. But unlike Jesus, this will be a deceptive act, as Satan lacks the power to truly bring people back to life. Meanwhile, the false prophet directs worship towards the Antichrist, which is similar to how the Holy Spirit points people to Jesus. In this period of the Great Tribulation, this unholy trinity will deceive many, especially those who turn away from the true and living God. This narrative from Revelation shows how the battle between good and evil involves not just physical conflicts, but also deep spiritual deception. And this reflects Satan's enduring desire to counterfeit God's authority and lead humanity astray. What do you think? Is the Antichrist already among us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Save the dinosaurs. Is it possible that dinosaurs were allowed on Noah's Ark? If they were, it would prove that dinosaurs and humans once lived alongside each other and that Noah's flood was a real global event. But not all Christians, and most people for that matter, agree with this view. Dinosaur. More like die no sir. According to a literal interpretation of the Bible, yes, dinosaurs and humans lived together. Genesis chapter 1 verses 24 to 27 says that God created all land animals and humans on the sixth day. This would mean that dinosaurs and humans were created at the same time. The Bible doesn't mention millions of years separating them. Plus, in the book of Job, there are descriptions of the behemoth and Leviathan, which some think sound an awful lot like dinosaurs. But nobody knows if this is accurate. Are there any ancient depictions of dinosaurs? Surprisingly, there is. Cave drawings and ancient carvings from Europe, South America, and North America show creatures that look like dinosaurs. Castles in Europe and pyramids in South America also feature dinosaur-like depictions. Stories of dragons from Europe, China, and the Middle East further support the idea that people might have seen dinosaur-like creatures in the past. Okay, but what does the Bible say about animals on the Ark? Genesis chapter 6 verses 19 to 20 tells us that Noah was instructed to bring 2 of every kind of living creature onto the ark. So if dinosaurs were around at that time, Noah definitely would have included them. Given the Bible's instructions and the size of younger dinosaurs, it's possible that they could have fit. The ark was designed to hold a pair of every kind of animal, which means that dinosaurs would have been on the list. Well, maybe not the fully grown dinos, but the babies and smaller ones. However, it's also possible that dinosaurs were not on the ark. After all, the Bible doesn't explicitly state that dinos were on the ark, so it's really open to interpretation. But from a young Earth creationist perspective, there's no reason to rule out the possibility. And now for number 7, but first it's shout-out time. I wanted to give a big thank you to Martin Brrs and Thirinel for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. Beelzebub is an interesting figure from the Bible who's often associated with demons and evil spirits. But who exactly is he, and why is he so notorious? In the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's an incident where Jesus is accused by the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the time, of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul. This Beelzebul is referred to as the Prince of the Demons, which implies that he's a top-ranking bad guy in the demon world. The Pharisees even suggested that Jesus was possessed by Beelzebul, which led Jesus to counter their claim with a bit of logic. He says that if Satan is driving out Satan, then his kingdom is divided and wouldn't stand. Or in other words, Jesus pointed out that their accusation didn't make any sense. I mean, for real, Satan would want those demons to stay inside whoever they possessed. He wouldn't be helping exorcise them. So why did the Pharisees accuse Jesus of being connected to Beelzebul in the first place? Well, it turns out that exorcism wasn't unique to Jesus. Some Pharisees also practiced it. But Jesus cleverly said to them, "If I drive out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your people drive them out?" That must have shut them up real quick. Now here's where it gets interesting. The name Beelzebul isn't mentioned in any surviving Jewish texts from that era. So who did people think Beelzebul was back in the day? There's some debate among scholars about this. One idea links Beelzebul to Beelzebub, an Old Testament figure. Beelzebub was the Philistinian god of Ekron. In 2 Kings chapter 1 verse 2, King Ahaziah of Israel, after getting injured, sent messengers to ask Beelzebub for help. But the prophet Elijah intercepted them and condemned Ahaziah for not trusting in God. Elijah then predicted that Ahaziah would die. Yikes. The name Beelzebub, which translates to Lord of the Flies or Lord of Dung, was likely a derogatory twist on the original name Beelzebul, meaning Lord of the High Place. This name-changing practice was common in Judaism to mock and discredit foreign gods by turning their names into something negative. So when the Pharisees accused Jesus of being linked to Beelzebul, they were essentially saying he was in league with a notorious pagan god. They were saying that this so-called god was an impostor who would bring about the judgment of the one true God, much like the doomed king Ahaziah. This association painted Jesus as an evil figure in their eyes. Over time, Beelzebul became synonymous with Satan. Early Christian writers like Athanasius in the 4th century AD interpreted Beelzebul as another name for Satan, and this helped cement this association in Christian thought. Angels are terrifying. When you think of angels, do you picture glowing, beautiful beings with wings, flowing robes, and kind faces? If so, you're not alone. This is the common image thanks to centuries of art and literature. But what if I told you that the Bible describes them quite differently, even terrifyingly so? First off, where does the word angel come from? The word angel has Greek roots from angelos and even earlier Hebrew roots from malach, which both mean messenger. These messengers were often referred to as malachim in the Bible, where they are said to closely resemble humans. Surprisingly though, there's no mention of them having wings. So why do we picture them with wings? It turns out that the earliest Christian art depicted angels as human-like beings without wings. The winged versions only appeared later on, around the 4th century, as artists added wings to symbolize their divine nature. And have you ever heard of cherubs or cherubim? The cute, chubby babies with wings? Well, forget that image. According to the Bible, cherubim are much more intense. The prophet Ezekiel describes them as having 4 faces: a human, an eagle, an ox, and a lion. He also says they have straight legs, 4 wings, and bull hooves for feet. So not exactly the cuddly beings from Renaissance art. Their true purpose? Guarding the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve were expelled. But there are other types of angels. We also have the seraphim, who hold the highest rank in the angel hierarchy. Their name, from the Hebrew term seraph, meaning venomous desert snake, and seraph, to burn, hints at their fearsome nature. They have 6 wings, 4 to cover their faces and feet out of humility before God, and 2 to fly. According to the prophet Isaiah, these angels continuously worship God. Day in and day out, 24/7 they sing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory." Then finally we meet the Ophanim, or the wheels. These are probably the most bizarre of them all. Described in Ezekiel's vision as interlocking wheels covered in eyes, they move without turning and are often seen as the wheels of God's chariot. Some theories even suggest that they could be ancient descriptions of UFOs. The Ophanim are considered the closest to God and serve as His personal guardians. So why are these angels so scary looking? One theory is that their forms are beyond human comprehension, making them appear terrifying to us. Another theory suggests that their otherworldly appearances reflect their immense power and divine nature. While our modern image of angels as gentle-winged protectors is comforting, the biblical descriptions remind us that these beings are far more complex and awe-inspiring. Their primary role is to serve and worship God, and despite their frightening appearances, they act with our best interests at heart. Well, that is, if you believe in them at all. The demon Mara. Buddhist literature is filled with fascinating supernatural beings, but none quite as intriguing as Mara. This demon, sometimes known as the Lord of Death, appears in many stories about the Buddha and his disciples. Mara is one of the earliest non-human characters in Buddhist scriptures. His name literally means destruction, and he symbolizes the passions and temptations that distract and deceive us. Mara is best known for his rule in the Buddha's enlightenment story. So what exactly did Mara do? As Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha-to-be, sat in deep meditation, Mara tried to disrupt him. First, he sent his beautiful daughters to seduce Siddhartha, but Siddhartha stayed focused. Then Mara unleashed his army of terrifying monsters, but Siddhartha didn't seem to mind. Now desperate, Mara claimed that the seat of enlightenment belonged to him, not to a mere mortal. His monstrous soldiers backed him up, shouting, "I am his witness." But Siddhartha wasn't having it. He felt like Mara was behaving like a child having a temper tantrum. So he reached out and touched the earth, and the earth backed him up, saying, "I bear you witness." After that, Mara was done for, utterly defeated, and as the morning star rose, Siddhartha achieved enlightenment and became the Buddha. I'm sure you're wondering, where did Mara come from? Mara might have roots in pre-Buddhist mythology. Some scholars think he could be based on Namuchi, a drought demon from Vedic mythology. Namuchi symbolized death and hostility due to drought, which fits well with Mara's role in Buddhist stories. Over time, Namuchi and Mara became interchangeable in early Buddhist texts. But what does Mara represent? Mara isn't just one character. He plays multiple roles. Sometimes he embodies death, other times he represents harmful emotions, conditioned existence, or temptation. This complexity makes it hard to pin down a single narrative for Mara. In Buddhist texts, Mara can appear as several different characters, each representing a different challenge or distraction. So is Mara like Satan in other religions? Sort of. There are some similarities. They both symbolize evil and temptation, but there are key differences. In Buddhism, evil is understood differently. Also, while Satan is the lord of hell in many religious traditions, Mara's domain is not at all the same. Mara is said to rule over the highest Deva heaven in the desire world. In Buddhist cosmology, the desire world is a realm where beings are driven by desires and cravings. Devas are supernatural beings. You can think of them as angels in the Buddhist faith. The highest Deva heaven within this realm is like the top level where these powerful beings live. Instead of ruling over a place of eternal punishment like hell, Mara governs a realm filled with beings who are still caught up in their desires and temptations. American writer Joseph Campbell offers an interesting retelling of Mara's story. He describes Mara appearing in three forms. First as karma or lust with his daughters, desire, fulfillment, and regret. But when they failed to sway Siddhartha, Mara transformed into the Lord of Death, leading an army of demons. Then Mara became Dharma, or duty. He tried to distract Siddhartha by claiming that worldly duties needed his attention. But Siddhartha's response was the same, touching the earth and finding support there. So what can we learn from Mara? In Buddhist teachings, the point is not to believe in Mara as a literal demon, but to understand what he represents. And that is the inner and outer distractions that prevent us from achieving enlightenment. Essentially, Mara's story is a powerful metaphor for overcoming obstacles on the path to spiritual awakening. Hell fiends. The Book of Revelation features some pretty terrifying imagery, especially when it comes to the hell fiends unleashed during the end times. One of the scariest parts is the description of the locust-like creatures from the fifth trumpet. When the fifth angel blows his trumpet, John sees a star that has fallen from heaven to earth. This star is given the key to the abyss, and when it opens the abyss, smoke pours out, darkening the sun and air. Out of this smoke come locusts with the power of scorpions. Things get a little weird from here. Unlike regular locusts that destroy crops, these demonic locusts attack people who don't have God's seal on their foreheads. They can't kill anyone because they're commanded not to, but they torment people for 5 months. The pain these people go through is likened to the pain of a scorpion sting. During this time, people will seek death but won't be able to find it. The locusts are described as looking like horses prepared for battle. They have faces like humans, hair like that of a woman's, and teeth like a lion's. They also have chests like iron breastplates, wings that sound like many chariots rushing into battle, and tails with stingers like scorpions. Their king is the angel of the abyss, named Abadon in Hebrew and Apollyon in Greek. But both names mean the same thing, the Destroyer. This vision could symbolize the terrible activity of demonic forces. Some people have even speculated that John might have seen modern-day attack helicopters but described them using the language and imagery of his time. When you think of locusts, the word destruction likely comes to mind. A swarm of locusts can devastate crops and bring great hardship, much like an attack helicopter can, only different. However, these locusts target people, specifically those who don't follow God. Christians have different interpretations of when this event will occur. Some believe it will happen just before Christ returns, which will be a period of intense demonic activity. Others think these dark powers have been at work throughout history. Regardless of the timing, the important takeaway is the nature of these forces and their leader. Both names, Abadon and Apollyon, mean the Destroyer, which is a fitting title for Satan, don't you think? This shows his character and ambitions in the world. But in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1-3, an angel binds Satan in the abyss for 1,000 years, showing a future time when Satan's power will be restrained. Hopefully that puts your mind at ease a little bit. When it comes to these hell fiends, notice who they torment. Not Christians, but those who reject God. It's enough to have you crack open that dusty old Bible sitting on your bedside table before you go to sleep. Don't worry though, the end of times won't be happening for a long, long time. Or will it? Abadon the Destroyer. Let's now get a little more into Abadon, or Apollyon. Before he was called the Destroyer, Abadon was known as a location, a place of destruction. The word Abadon appears in the Bible and other ancient Jewish and Christian texts. It's not only associated with destruction, but also death and the underworld. In the Hebrew Bible, Abadon primarily refers to a site of devastation. It's used interchangeably with the word Sheol, which is described as the underworld. For example, Proverbs chapter 15 verse 11 says, "Sheol and Abadon lie open before the Lord, how much more than the hearts of men." In these texts, Abadon is depicted as a place where the wicked are punished or the dead are forgotten. It's similar to how we think of hell today. Abadon is also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient manuscripts discovered near the Dead Sea in Israel between 1947 and 1956. In these texts, Abadon is also often synonymous with Sheol or Hell. In what's known as the Thanksgiving hymns, there are phrases like "Hell and Abadon shall open," and "from the hell of Abadon." In other texts, Abadon is a specific part of the underworld, such as the apocryphal Psalms, where it's described as the bottom of hell. Okay, so when did Abadon become a person? In some texts, he is portrayed as a living being. In Job chapter 28 verse 22, Abadon and death are depicted as entities that can hear and speak. The two beings say, "With our ears we have heard a report of it." This suggests that Abadon has some awareness and is distinct from Sheol, hell. In the New Testament, Abadon becomes even more interesting. In Revelation chapter 9 verses 1-11, Abadon is the name of the angel of the abyss. After the fifth angel sounds his trumpet, a star falls from heaven and opens the bottomless pit, releasing smoke and a plague of locusts. You know, the locusts with the human faces. In this instance, Abadon, the Destroyer, is seen as a powerful and destructive force. Abadon even appears in various other Jewish writings not included in the biblical canon. In the Babylonian Talmud, he's listed as one of the 7 names of Gehenna, or Hell. The biblical Antiquities of Philo describes God resurrecting the dead at the end of time, with Abadon and Sheol restoring their dead. This further emphasizes Abadon's association with destruction and the afterlife. Abadon also appears in occult literature such as The Magus by Francis Barrett, where it's listed as a fury associated with evil and destruction. But in the Key of Solomon, a medieval grimoire, Abadon is invoked as one of the names of God for protection and success in magical operations. So, is Abadon a place, an angel of the abyss, or a name of God? It's really hard to know for sure. But go ahead and let me know what you think in the comments. Isolated animals. How did animals get from Noah's Ark to Australia? How did the koalas make their way to such a distant land? Did Noah personally deliver these animals to their new forever homes? Skeptics might imagine Noah trekking to far-off places like Australia or New Zealand to gather animals before the flood. But according to the Bible, Noah didn't need to go on a global expedition. Animals supposedly came to Noah of their own accord, like it says in Genesis chapter 6 verses 20. How exactly this happened isn't detailed in the Bible, so it leaves room for various interpretations. Surprise, surprise. The geography of the world before the flood is another big question. The Bible doesn't specify if the continents were separated or one giant landmass. If the world was one big continent, it would simplify animal migration after the flood. With no detailed records from that time, though, piecing together the past is challenging. After the Krakatoa eruption on Rakata Island in 1883, the island remained barren for years. However, it was eventually colonized by various creatures. This shows us that animals can definitely spread across seemingly insurmountable distances. For instance, small animals can be carried by wind, or they might even float on debris. Before continental drift theories became popular, scientists believed that lower sea levels during ice ages created land bridges. These bridges, like the one that once connected Asia to the Americas, could have allowed animals to travel to distant places. This idea fits with some geologists' views on ice ages and shifting land masses. Marsupials like kangaroos and koalas are thought to be native to Australia. However, opossums and fossil marsupials have been found in the Americas and other continents. This suggests that marsupials might have lived in various parts of the world before becoming isolated in Australia. Imagine the migration of animals as a slow and steady process. Just as rabbits introduced to Australia spread across the continent, early post-flood animals could have migrated over centuries. Populations could have gradually dispersed to various locations without needing a miraculous journey. Some animals, like Madagascar's lemurs, are found only in specific regions. This isn't necessarily due to one-time migrations, but could be because these animals were once more widespread. Changing climates and environments may have led to their isolation in specific areas. Certain animals need unique environments to thrive. The giant panda, for example, relies on bamboo, while koalas depend on eucalyptus. These specialized needs might have influenced their migration paths, which could have been suitable at the time, but changed with climate shifts. Mammon, the demon of greed. Mammon is a demonic figure in occult and religious traditions, often representing greed and material ambition. In ancient times, Mammon was viewed as a deity connected to wealth. Over the centuries, however, his image evolved into that of a demon, especially within Christian theology. Where does the name Mammon come from? The name Mammon first pops up in the Christian Bible, specifically in Matthew chapter 6 verse 24. Here, Jesus warns us that you can't serve both God and Mammon, highlighting the conflict between spiritual devotion and material greed. This sets Mammon up as the embodiment of worldly temptation. During the Middle Ages, Mammon's role shifted dramatically. Instead of being a mere concept, he was depicted as a prince of hell, symbolizing greed and the unethical accumulation of wealth. This darker portrayal became central to Christian demonology, influencing how Mammon is viewed in occult practices today. But did anyone actually worship Mammon? Unlike gods of wealth like Plutus from Greek mythology or Lakshmi from Hinduism, there's no solid evidence that Mammon was worshipped as a formal deity. Most historical accounts suggest that references to Mammon were metaphorical, shedding light on the dangers of excessive greed. In occultism, however, Mammon is more than just a metaphor. He's actively invoked in rituals, with practitioners creating altars and making offerings to connect with him. Mammon is also known as Hell's treasurer and has been associated with significant historical power shifts, such as England's rise as a maritime force. For occult practitioners, Mammon symbolizes the immense power of wealth. Whether used for practical needs or as part of more complex rituals, Mammon represents the blend of material ambition and spiritual practice. In this way, he remains a compelling figure in both historical and modern occult traditions. Thanks for watching. What do you think of all these beasts and angels? What about the animals allowed on Noah's Ark?
Biblical giants. As far as scientists are concerned, nobody in the 21st century has ever seen a biblical giant with their own eyes. However, there is evidence that has been discovered in Israel that suggests these beings lived during the days of the Bible. The Nephilim are described in the Bible as the sons of fallen angels and the daughters of men. When the angels saw how alluring the human females were, they couldn't help themselves and began breeding with them. The offspring of the unnatural union were called Nephilim, giants that walked the face of the earth. They were said to be so terrible that God sent a flood to kill everything on the planet and wipe the slate clean. The Nephilim supposedly stood much taller than ordinary humans, but were otherwise quite similar. If they were to be found in the archaeological record, the only difference would be that they had much larger bones than us. In the Book of Enoch, these giants supposedly lived on Mount Hermon in Israel. Coincidentally, that was the same place where the biblical king Og rose up to fight the Israelites. Og was allegedly buried underneath a mysterious rock formation called the Wheel of the Giants. It is a series of concentric rings with a large mound in the center covering a mysterious hidden chamber. In Deuteronomy, Og was the only remaining man from the days before the flood, other than Noah and his family. It's taught in the Jewish tradition that he survived by clinging to the side of the ark as a stowaway. It's been said that Og was a giant who slept in a bed over 14 feet, 4 meters long. Unfortunately, his bones have not technically been found or documented, but many Christian scholars believe the Wheel of the Giants is the burial place of the last Nephilim. Biblical visions. At the Out-of-Body Experience Research Center in Los Angeles, scientists believe they have established the scientific reason behind visions of angels and other biblical encounters, specifically the ones that are discussed in the Bible. 30 volunteers were instructed on how to have out-of-body experiences. They were given instructions on what to do mentally upon waking in the middle of the night or becoming lucid just after a dream or nightmare. These procedures were supposed to culminate in bizarre experiences that could be perceived as encounters with heavenly beings. 15 out of the 30 volunteers experienced such encounters. The volunteers who reported visions of angels were told to recreate the story of Elijah from the Bible. Elijah goes into the wilderness and falls asleep beneath a tree, exhausted and ready to die. Just before he slips away, an angel wakes Elijah and tells him to eat. When he wakes from his vision, Elijah finds a loaf of bread and a jug of water. The researchers figured this biblical passage would be the best for sleepers to have a vision of their own. Surprisingly, 9 of the subjects dreamed of meeting an angel and eating food, while the other 6 only dreamed of encountering an angel. The scientists are now claiming that every encounter with an angel described in the Bible was likely the result of an extremely lucid dream and a man with a pad of paper nearby. Encounter with the devil. There was a nun who lived in the 17th century and may have had a frightening encounter with the biggest villain in the Bible. Her name was Sister Maria Crocifissa della Concessione, and she lived in Sicily in the late 1600s when she was supposedly possessed by Lucifer himself. Maria was born in 1645 and entered the Benedictine convent at Parma de Montechiaro when she was only 15 years old. In the year 1676, she woke up one morning covered in ink with a mysterious letter written in an indecipherable language sitting in front of her. When her sisters at the convent asked her what happened, she said she was possessed by Satan, Lord of Hell, and that he had forced her hand into writing the message. This may sound like the premise of some B-rated horror movie, but it's 100% true. The letter is still around to this day and was only recently deciphered, 940 years later, thanks to a group of Italian computer scientists. A team from the Ludum Science Center used a new program to do the decoding. The scientists loaded all the languages Sister Maria may have known into the program, and the letter turned out to be a bizarre mixture of characters from Latin and even runic Greek. The letter describes the Holy Trinity as dead weights. It says God was invented by man, and it finishes off by saying God and his religion are a failed system that worked for no one. They believe Maria likely suffered from schizophrenia, which is why she wrote the strange letter. Others believe the bizarre ramblings are proof she really was possessed by the devil, the Leviathan. The Leviathan is described in the Bible as an incredible beast, a sea creature with a serpentine nature. The Leviathan was not a sea serpent, but a terrifying animal with a powerful neck and sharp teeth that exhaled smoke from its nostrils like a seething cauldron. Researchers believe the Leviathan in the Bible may have been an extinct species of serpent-like whale called the Basilosaurus. The remains of this creature were discovered at the Wadi al-Hitan site in southwest Egypt. In English, the place is called the Valley of the Whales. It's a dry wasteland where giant skeletons of ancient extinct whales can be seen poking out of the sand. The whole area was once a sea, but that sea is gone, and thousands of years of wind has slowly revealed the bones of the dead marine monsters. Some of these beasts were Basilosaurus, creatures that could grow to be an estimated 70 feet, 21 meters in length. They were apex predators and looked like underwater dragons. Biblical scholars believe that passages from the book of Job can be connected directly to the Valley of Whales. When the ancient Egyptians came across this place in the desert and saw the crushed bones of sea monsters lying in the dust, they interpreted them as real monsters. They became Leviathans and were assumed to have been squashed by God or devastated following some catastrophic drought. Another theory is that Leviathan was a blanket term for all whales, creatures Job and others would have been able to see in the ocean. Ronald Hagler and a meeting with demons. Ronald Hagler had a terrifying encounter with demons in 1949, and priests performed an exorcism on the young boy 70 years ago. It was a harrowing ordeal that would become the inspiration for the famous book, The Exorcist. This biblical encounter began in Washington, D.C., when 13-year-old Ronald learned how to use a Ouija board with help from his beloved Aunt Harriet. After his aunt passed away, Ronald began to experience strange things. He heard scratching coming from the floors and from the walls, his mattress randomly moved, and he began to show signs of psychological issues. Ronald's family was desperate to help the boy, so they consulted everyone from their doctor to a psychiatrist. They also spoke with their minister, who was worried about demonic possession, and he suggested that the family seek out the help of the Jesuits. In February of 1949, the church granted Father E. Albert Hughes permission to perform an exorcism. The Catholic priest strapped the boy to his mattress and began the process, but Ronald broke free and attacked the priest, leaving the ritual unfinished. The family then moved to St. Louis, where 2 Jesuits agreed to try again with an exorcism. They believed the boy was possessed by 10 demons, not just one. It took night after night of repeatedly performing the exorcism until finally, the priests broke through. The boy snapped back to reality, saying that he had a vision of Saint Michael defeating Satan on the battlefield. Thankfully, that was the end of Ronald's demonic possession. But whether he truly did have demons living inside of him or not, nobody will ever know. Do you think demonic possession is possible, or do you think there are other explanations to explain the symptoms? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. The snake with legs. After the serpent persuades Eve to taste the forbidden fruit, and Eve convinces Adam to eat it as well, they all get in trouble from God. Adam and Eve are banished, and God curses the serpent to crawl on its belly and eat dirt for the rest of its life. This seems fairly normal until you scrutinize the passage and realize it implies that before the event, the serpent had legs. This is an often overlooked passage in the book of Genesis. In 2019, scientists from Argentina discovered a fossilized ancestor of modern snakes that once had legs. This seems to back up the idea that God cursed snakes to no longer have their limbs. The weird thing is that the fossils are 100 million years old. That means they predate the Bible by a significant amount of time. However, scientists say that snakes likely lost their front legs millions of years before their hind legs. It's possible that in the era the Bible was written, there were still some remaining snakes floundering around with 2 stubby hind legs. Chariots in the sky. In the book of Revelations, Zechariah has a vision of the apocalypse. At one point he describes witnessing chariots of fire streaming out from the clouds. These chariots were made of solid iron and bronze, and were led by red, black, and white horses. In the year 66 AD, Roman Emperor Josephus had a similar vision. He supposedly saw with his own eyes an army in the clouds, metallic chariots blazing across the sky. Shortly after the emperor saw these mysterious things in the heavens, he attacked Jerusalem and burned their great temple to the ground. Emperor Josephus was hardly the only person in the ancient world to see something strange in the sky and interpret it as the chariots of God. And there has been a long debate as to whether these fiery chariots were divine prophecy or extraterrestrial visitors. NASA scientist Richard Stothers believes that with the introduction of the Bible, people in the 1st century began to interpret extraterrestrial encounters as having divine visions from God. These people thought they were seeing God's will or his army of angels hiding in the clouds, when really they may have been seeing alien ships hovering in the sky. Biblical unicorn. One of the creatures mentioned in the Bible is the unicorn. Strangely, it's discussed in casual conversation with the likes of lions and goats. In the book of Job, unicorns are not mythical beasts or things from legend, but very real animals that walked alongside humans. New archaeological evidence has shown that humans may have seen unicorns in the days the Bible was written. Biblical authors could have been some of the last people who physically sighted unicorns before they went extinct. In Kazakhstan, researchers found the skull of a creature that looked like a rhino mixed with a horse. The creature has been dubbed the Siberian unicorn, and its skull was dated at just 29,000 years old. Before this skull was discovered, scientists believed the Siberian unicorn went extinct 350,000 years ago. Keep in mind that the real unicorn didn't look anything like what we know from fairy tales, and it wasn't a beautiful white steed with a golden horn. Instead, it was a furry horse-like beast with a giant rhino horn sticking out of its forehead. And although this particular specimen is 29,000 years old, it's likely not when it went extinct. The creature, which was roughly 6 feet, 1.8 meters tall, and 9,000 pounds, 4,082 kilograms, may have lived until just recently. If the authors of the Bible wrote about the creature as though they themselves had seen it, there's a high probability that they did. The Angel and the Senator. In 2013, Illinois Senator Mark Kirk claimed that he encountered 3 angels. The Republican senator said he was visited by these beings while recovering from a stroke. The angels stood at the foot of his bed in Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago and asked if he wanted to go with them. However, Mark told them no and said that he wasn't done living on Earth yet. According to Mark's surgeon, Dr. Richard Fessler, the senator's brain functions were completely normal at the time he supposedly encountered the angels. His thought process was normal, and his mental state was perfectly fine. Mark is now one of the 8 million Americans who believe to have physically seen with their own eyes angelic messengers from heaven. Like all 8 million of these alleged sightings, there is no possible way to confirm or deny what they saw, and there has been no definitive proof ever captured on camera. The rooster snake. The cockatrice, a rooster and snake hybrid from medieval mythology, is one of the strangest creatures mentioned in the King James Version of the Old Testament. The cockatrice is mentioned multiple times, usually brought up as some kind of punishment. For example, Jeremiah 8:17 says, "For behold, I will send cockatrices among you, and they shall bite you." It was described as a weird animal born from the egg of a chicken, but with the wings of a bat, the tail of a snake, and the legs and head of a rooster. In the small English village of Whirlwool, one of these biblical monsters allegedly terrorized the citizens in the Middle Ages. A duck supposedly laid an egg, which was then hatched by a toad, and the creature that was born grew to be a monster. It looked like a miniature dragon and was cared for by the villagers, who were curious about the creature until it grew so big it started killing them. Whether the cockatrice or some other mutant creature terrorized the village, we will never know. However, the legend is very real, and it bothered the locals so much that until the 1930s, they supposedly refused to eat duck eggs. Do you think ancient angel sightings were really just UFOs in the sky? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.